And now follows a list of all the known SKAVEN spells. First up, the petty spells. Favor. Gain skill or steal it from another SKAVEN's own favor given by the Horned Rat. The Ghostly Flame. You conjure a small blob of glowing green fire out of thin air. It drips vicious fluid as it burns, and can be thrown at a foe. Otherwise, this petty spell generates light equivalent to a torch, and remains for 1 hour before sputtering out. The Mark of the Horned Rat. A target creature gains an unsightly blemish, taking the form of an open, weeping sore on his forehead or the back of his hand. Grey Seers use this spell to mark their messengers. The Rat Thrall. You summon an ordinary brown rat. For a number of hours, you may communicate with the rat as if you shared a common language, and it must obey all of your commands, even if it would cause its own death to do so. Rat Thralls can fetch small objects, gnaw through ropes, and other general tasks that an ordinary rat should be able to do. But such missions are limited by the rat's animal intelligence. Vector. Make a single target within 12 yards more susceptible to disease for 24 hours. Rack. You cause a single target within 12 yards to experience a jolt of searing pain. And now, the main spells. Air of Pestilence. The caster hacks out a cloud that magically spreads and befilths a wide area. All who breathe in its pestilent airs seem to shrivel and weaken, their bodies sagging. The Armor of Darkness. You solidify the shadows around your body, in addition to making you harder to see in low light conditions. This shadow armor also protects you from harm. You cannot use this spell while wearing normal armor, and it loses its effects if armor is donned. The Avatar of the Horned Rat. There are stories of Grey Seers with huge horns who leap into the midst of battles and skewer their enemies. This spell may be the source of those stories. On casting, huge horns sprout from the seer's head, and his body grows in size by roughly half again the normal size. The spirit of the Horned Rat flows into him. The seer is lost in a mad frenzy and tears at all about him, friend or foe alike. Such distinctions no longer have any meaning for him. He also is immune to any psychological effects and will not stop until slain. The transformation places a strain on the SKAVEN's body that it is unable to sustain, and consequently, there is a steadily increasing chance that the SKAVEN's heart will burst. When this happens, the supernatural frenzy will keep the seer alive and fighting for a brief time, after which he collapses in a dead heap on the ground. The Black Whirlwind. You summon a putrid whirlwind of vile smoke and stinging ashes anywhere within 48 yards. Bless with filth. A foul mist wraps around the weapons of a nearby unit, and the weapons begin to drip with toxic filth. Brittle Bone. One of the oldest SKAVEN spells. This allows a SKAVEN wizard to weaken the bones of an individual target. A hit to different areas of the body will cause different debilitating effects. Hitting the head will cause the victim to feel nauseous and suffer terrible headaches. If hit to the body, the victim finds it hard to breathe, their chest racked with pain. If hit to the arm, the joints in the victim's arm ache painfully when moved. If hit to the leg, the victim's leg is painful to walk upon, sending shooting pains up their spine. Buoyant Passage. You become as buoyant as a piece of balsa wood, allowing you to tread over liquid surfaces like water, sewage, or oil as if they were solid. The Black Hunger. A horrifically powerful spell which consumes the minds of all SKAVEN around the caster, drowning their intellect with an all-consuming need to feed. The Chittering. Most SKAVEN magic corrupts the body. This spell corrupts the mind. When cast, the seer spreads a web of insanity around him, warping the minds of all within 100 yards. Victims degenerate into a mindless horde, instinctively aiding all SKAVEN and the seer in particular. They gather around the caster to protect them, follow simple instructions, and attack anyone unaffected by the magic, using hands and teeth. Victims also lose the power of speech, communicating with the gestures and the rat-like chittering noises that give this spell its name. The Cloud of Corruption. The caster releases a stinking blast of diseased fury. Curse of the Horned Rat. The dreaded 13th spell. With a sickening lurch, the fabric of reality is torn by the twisting power of the Great Horned One, turning opposition to clan rats. The Crackling Doom. You send a single, crackling arc of green energy at any opponent within 12 yards. The Crack's Call. With the arcane incantation invoked, the SKAVEN ends by stamping his horrible, pinkish, rat-like foot, causing the very ground to split asunder. Death Frenzy. Gesticulating wildly, the caster gifts a unit with a rapid and frothing urge to close and strike the foe. The Infecting Ruin. Green ribbons of warp energy tear the flesh from the target's bones. Gnaw. A gnaw spell is like unleashing a horde of invisible rats to attack a victim or structure. Its area of effect is only 1 square yard, but its ferocity is such that it continues to gnaw until the target structure is no more. The gnaw spell has many applications, but is often used for hole punching in gates, earthworks, or palisades during sieges. The Great Red Pox. The caster vomits forth a crimson mist that rapidly spreads across the battlefield, causing an instantaneous eruption of fist-sized boils and then a most painful death. The Howling Warp Gale. The caster gestures twitchingly to the skies, and fierce hurricane gales begin to build until it swirls around the entire battlefield. The Infecting Gaze. The spell infects one individual with the Black Plague. Infecting Gaze is perhaps one of the most underhanded SKAVEN spells. Victims rarely realize that they have had the spell cast upon them, and even once the plague takes hold, the victim may not realize that the cause is magical. Being magical, the disease will not spread beyond its intended victim, although it may well cause panic in urban areas. The Mantle of Contagion. You taint a blanket, cloak, or piece of clothing with a virulent strain of Cruz. The Musk of Terror. You summon a large cloud of demonic musk, forcing all creatures within to cower with terror. The Pelt of the Assassin. By calling upon the ever-changing chaos of the warp, you alter the structure of your fur so that it changes color to match your surroundings. The Pestilent Breath. Uttering horrible phrases, the SKAVEN sorcerer belches forth an impossibly foul cloud. The Pit of the Underworld. The caster strains his mind to open a great rent in the earth. The target site begins to shake until the ground gives way to a vast pit that drops into blackness below. Plague. The caster unleashes a disease from the Book of Woe. Plague's Source. Plague source enchants a water source with the Black Plague. Springs, wells, and ale kegs are all common targets that SKAVEN sorcerers choose for this spell. The Poisonous Postule. You create a pulsing, seeping pustule on one of your extremities. When lanced and drained, the pus from this weeping sore can be spread onto a hand weapon. If a weapon coated with this toxic secretion wounds, it additionally deals more wounds depending on how strong the caster is with magic. Putrefy. With a flourish and a curse, you cause an amount of food to rot and decay, rendering it totally inedible. This spell is used with great effect to induce famine in surface populations. Any creature that eats the infected food is automatically infected with the Galloping Trots. Scourge. The SKAVEN sorcerer thrusts his paws into the ground while chittering fiery incantations, causing a gout of flame to burst forth. Screech. This spell lets a grey seer call to other SKAVEN over long distances. To cast, the rat man throws back his head and stretches his vocal cords to emit a high-pitched scream that carries half a mile per level of the seer, especially to the sensitive ears of the SKAVEN. The screech is just a call and carries no information, though the tone can convey an emotion such as desperation, anger, or eagerness. The Shadow's Companion. With this spell, a SKAVEN sorcerer can melt into the darkness simply by stepping into a shadow. Shriveled Tongue. This spell is intended as a countermeasure against other wizards. It shrivels the victim's tongue so that speech of any kind, such as incantations, is made impossible. Skitter Leap. The SKAVEN disappears in a puff of smoke to appear elsewhere on the battlefield. Sticky Paws. You grant yourself the ability to walk or crawl upon walls and ceilings as fast as you could run on the flat ground. Objects you carry or wear are still affected by gravity in a normal fashion and fall to the ground if dropped. Swift Scamper. You grant yourself the ability to move at an increased rate. The Toxic Rain. Calling upon the power of the Horned Rat, you conjure a poisonous cloud that drifts above a dozen feet above the ground, up to 36 yards away. Soon after casting, the cloud rains a lethal poison upon all characters within the affected area, causing those affected to fall into a nightmare-filled slumber. The Traceless Demise. The body of any creature that dies while under the effects of this spell melts away into a foul-smelling black slime. Traceless Demise is commonly cast upon the assassins of Clan Eshin before they embark on a hunt, ensuring that no SKAVEN corpses are left behind. The Veil of Flies. With a curse and a flailing of your arms, you summon a cloud of gnats or biting flies. They swarm about you, biting and stinging your enemies. The Verminous Ruin. The caster summons a living tide of voracious rats that scurry forth and carve a swath of ruin across the battlefield. Vermintide. The caster invokes, and many rats answer the call. Warp Lightning. The SKAVEN points a fleshy paw and bolts of greenish black lightning arc outward. The Warp Stars. You conjure up a number of poisoned warp stars and fling them at one or more opponents within 36 yards. The Warp Storm. You summon a storm anywhere within 48 yards, which angrily discharges greenish black bolts of warp lightning. This storm is formed of pure warp energy, fueled by the malignant power of the Horned Rat, and may appear in any locale, even underground. The Weeping World soars. At the Plague Priest's wretched word, the world itself begins to bubble and boil with toxic pus. The Weeping Wounds. You cause an enemy's wounds to become horribly infected. And at last, Wither. Chanting passages from the Liber Buponicus, the wizard casts a spell of wasting, shrinking sickness.